Okay, so what happens when one of the biggest banks in the world faces a test? And it's not about their money, but about their technology. This is a really pivotal story in recent financial history, one where the fate of a global institution really hinged on its ability to just manage its own data.
And this was the verdict. This is what U.S. regulators told Deutsche Bank not just once, but over and over again throughout the 2010s. And look, this wasn't some little footnote in a report. It was a huge, glaring failure on one of the most important tests a bank can possibly face.
And here's the official reason. You see, the regulators' big finding wasn't that the bank was out of money. Nope, it was something way more fundamental. And, in our world today, maybe a little more scary. They pointed to a complete breakdown in the bank's ability to simply gather and understand its own information.
So these repeated failures on what they call stress tests, they weren't just embarrassing. They actually exposed this totally modern, kind of hidden vulnerability that went right to the very core of how the bank worked.
This right here is the heart of the whole story. From the outside, you hear failed stress test, and you immediately think, oh, they don't have enough cash. But for Deutsche Bank, the reality was so much more complicated. They had the capital, but their data systems, they were in such a mess that they couldn't produce a reliable report to prove it. They literally couldn't answer the most basic question, how much risk are you guys actually holding?
So, how does a global financial giant, an institution built entirely on numbers, get to a point where it can't even trust its own numbers? Well, the answer lies in decades of digital neglect, really. It was this patchwork of old legacy systems that got stitched together after countless mergers, creating this fragile architecture that was just waiting to break.
First up, you've got the classic problem of data silos. Just imagine every big department in the bank, trading, lending, derivatives, is keeping its own records, but they're all in a different language, and they're all in different locked rooms. A lot of these rooms were just inherited from other banks they bought over the years and were never really integrated properly. So when regulators show up and ask for one single unified picture of the bank's total risk, well, good luck with that. It was practically impossible.
Now, to try and solve that silo problem, the bank was using something called ETL pipelines. The easiest way to think of these is like digital plumbing that's supposed to connect all those locked rooms together. But at Deutsche Bank, that plumbing was ancient, it was underfunded, and it was constantly breaking down. So data wasn't just fragmented. The very systems that were supposed to bring it all together were leaking, they were getting clogged, and they were failing all the time.
And this just perfectly shows the domino effect. It all starts with the data, right? It's trapped in all those separate systems. Then, the pipelines that are supposed to pull it all together, they fail. They deliver this corrupted, incomplete picture to the next stage, which means the super complex financial models trying to calculate risk are being fed total garbage. And when you feed a model garbage, it spits out conflicting, nonsensical numbers. The end result? Well, it's inevitable. The final report that you hand to the regulators is fundamentally untrustworthy.
And these weren't just, abstract tech problems happening on a server somewhere in a basement. No, this data chaos had severe, very real consequences that just hammered the bank's reputation, its investors, and its bottom line hard.
The fallout from all this was immense. First, the bank's reputation, its most valuable asset, was in tatters. But more than that, regulators actually barred them from making capital distributions. That is a huge blow. It means you can't pay dividends to your shareholders, you can't buy back stock, you're directly punishing your own investors. All of this forced them into these years-long multi-billion-dollar programs just to try and fix their data infrastructure, all while being under the constant, humiliating watch of regulators from all over the world.
This whole episode really became a landmark case for the entire industry. It fundamentally changed the definition of what it even means for a bank to be considered safe and stable here in the 21st century.
Which, of course, brings us to this central question. For centuries, the strength of a bank was measured by one thing: how much capital it had in the vaults. But the Deutsche Bank story really forces us to ask, is that still true?
And the answer, the crucial point is this: we are in a new era. A bank's survival, its basic ability to function, now depends just as much on the health of its data architecture as it does on its cash reserves. Your risk report is only as strong as the databases and the pipelines that feed it. Simple as that.
And so that leaves us with this final, kind of unsettling thought. Remember, this wasn't some small community bank. This was a global financial titan. If its foundational data systems were this fragile, it really makes you wonder, where else in our deeply interconnected financial world are the digital pipes starting to crack?